Inside Windsor Castle, Catherine is brought into a room with no photographers, no press officers, and no public ceremony. Waiting for her is Princess Anne, standing beside several locked jewelry cases removed from secure royal storage. One case carries the private cipher of Queen Elizabeth II. Anne does not open it. She tells Catherine that the contents are connected to a decision made before the late Queen died. The meeting is not about choosing jewelry for another banquet. Anne places an inventory in front of Catherine, Princess of Wales, and explains that the collection was kept together for a reason. Some pieces marked birthdays, others marriage, and others decades of royal service. But the strongest piece remains locked because Catherine must first accept the responsibility attached to the collection. Anne then points to one final instruction. It concerns Catherine's future, Prince William's reign, and the woman expected one day to stand closest to the crown. Only after that condition is understood will the final case be opened, and the question becomes unavoidable. What exactly did Elizabeth reserve? Why did Anne wait? And what will Catherine receive? The handover begins with a private summons from Princess Anne to Catherine at Kensington Palace. The invitation is deliberately personal. William is not asked to attend, and the normal communications team is left out. Catherine is told only that Anne wants to see her at Windsor after the castle closes to visitors. The timing immediately separates the meeting from an ordinary family visit. Anne is not arranging tea, and there is no anniversary being marked. When Catherine arrives, she finds 3 cases already waiting under documented supervision, each accompanied by paperwork rather than presentation cards. The first object Catherine recognizes is not a jewel, but the late Queen's cypher stamped onto one of the cases. Beside it lies a formal palace inventory listing pieces removed from secure royal storage. Anne explains that the cases were assembled as one group rather than selected for a single appearance. That changes Catherine's understanding of why she has been called. This is not about borrowing something for a dinner. The paperwork concerns future use, custody, and responsibility. Anne keeps the locks closed while Catherine reads, because the order matters. Before she sees the pieces, she has to understand the framework governing them. Then Catherine reaches a page carrying Queen Elizabeth's signature, linked to instructions from the final years of her reign. The document does not describe Catherine as a favorite. It connects her instead to future service. Anne makes that distinction clear. Elizabeth had spent a lifetime using jewelry as part of diplomacy, remembrance, and continuity. If selected pieces were to move into Catherine's active use, the transfer could not be treated as a family gift with no wider meaning. Catherine now realizes the late Queen had considered this moment while she was still alive, and Anne has been waiting for the conditions around it to become right. That delay also prevents a private family decision from being mistaken for an announcement about immediate rank or succession. The delay makes sense only after the 8th of September 2022, when Queen Elizabeth II died and King Charles III succeeded her. Behind the visible change of reign came a private process involving possessions, records, art, and jewelry. Not every object associated with Elizabeth belonged to her in the same way. Some pieces remained tied to the sovereign or to the royal collection, while others could fall under personal family arrangements. That meant any future handover had to begin with classification before sentiment. A jewel could carry a private memory and still sit inside a legal structure that prevented it from simply being passed from one woman to another. Anne became especially important because she was Elizabeth's only daughter, had known the meaning behind many personal gifts, and understood how her mother used them in public duty. Catherine continued wearing pieces associated with Elizabeth and Diana at major occasions, but the larger group described in the inventory remained protected. The delay was deliberate. Anne did not want a transfer made in the confusion immediately after the funeral. She also did not want Catherine to receive historic jewels, simply because she had become Princess of Wales. The late Queen's instruction, as Anne presents it, required more than a change of title. Catherine first had to demonstrate steadiness through years of national ceremonies, family pressure, and royal service. Anne had watched her carry major public moments without treating symbolism as personal ownership. That is what finally convinced her that the point identified in Elizabeth's instruction had arrived. The inventory provides the first clue. Besides several jewels is wording tied not to Catherine's current wardrobe but to her future position. Anne explains that the collection was never intended to signal the end of Charles's reign. It was meant to prepare the woman who could one day stand beside William without waiting until accession to understand what these objects represented. The years before that moment would become part of the training, allowing meaning and protocol to be learned gradually. Anne next shows Catherine an addendum separating the selected pieces from the crown jewels, the broader royal collection, and private possessions. The distinction is essential. The crown jewels remain ceremonial regalia under separate custody. Royal collection objects are held within a constitutional framework rather than treated as a monarch's ordinary personal property. The selected group, therefore, has to be examined piece by piece. Some can be used through authorized loan, some can be placed in Catherine's custody, and some remain dynastic objects whose ownership does not change even if the active wearer does. The important line in the document concerns the woman preparing to become queen. Elizabeth's instruction, as framed in the papers before Catherine, says certain jewels should continue serving the monarchy through the person expected to carry that role in the next generation. Anne has been left to judge readiness, while Charles retains the authority necessary to approve use where sovereign control is required. The arrangement therefore depends on three separate responsibilities: Elizabeth's intention, Anne's judgment, and Charles's authorization. Catherine is receiving neither unlimited ownership nor a symbolic prize. She is being placed inside a chain of custody designed to survive reigns. That makes Anne the guardian of her mother's instruction, Catherine the proposed active custodian, and Charles the protector of the present crown. If Anne releases the pieces too early, the palace risks suggesting that Catherine has been advanced ahead of Camilla. If she waits until William becomes king, Catherine would begin queenship without years of experience carrying the late queen's most recognizable symbols. Anne's solution is preparation before succession. She reaches for the smallest case first, but not because it contains the least valuable piece. Its history begins with Elizabeth before she became queen, at the age when public duty began shaping the rest of her life. Anne wants Catherine to encounter that beginning first, because every later object in the room depends upon the same idea of service. Anne had witnessed that transformation more closely than almost anyone. She was the only daughter who watched Princess Elizabeth become sovereign in 1952, and she knew that many celebrated jewels carried memories invisible during public appearances. A necklace could mark a birthday. A bracelet could preserve stones removed from an earlier gift. A brooch could carry the memory of King George VI or Queen Mary. Once, Elizabeth became one of the most photographed women in the world. Those private beginnings were easily buried beneath ceremony. Anne never forgot them because she had known the person before the symbol became permanent. After the Queen's death, Anne resisted allowing those objects to become decorative relics, removed from the purpose they had served for decades. She saw Catherine as someone capable of connecting Elizabeth's reign with William's future, because Catherine had spent years learning royal work without trying to compete with the sovereign. That mattered to Anne. Catherine did not need Elizabeth's jewelry to create importance for herself. The pieces needed someone whose service could keep their meaning alive. In Anne's view, the correct wearer was not simply the next prominent woman in the family, but the woman willing to carry the history without treating it as personal status. Before Catherine accepts anything, Anne gives a warning about public interpretation, royal symbolism, and future appearances. Once Catherine wears certain pieces, Every photograph will be analyzed. A brooch can become a message about continuity. A necklace can invoke a Commonwealth connection. A tiara strongly associated with Elizabeth could instantly be read as preparation for queenship. Catherine, therefore, has to accept that custody will influence how the public sees her. The jewels may sit quietly in a case, but the moment they appear on her at a state occasion, the palace will lose control over some of the meaning people attach to them. Anne wants Catherine prepared for that scrutiny before any jewel becomes the center of a photograph seen around the world. The ceremony almost stops because Princess Anne cannot simply hand over any historic jewel she chooses. The royal collection is held in trust by the sovereign for successors and the nation, and the crown jewels remain outside ordinary family possession entirely. Every item Anne wants Catherine to use must therefore be identified correctly. If a piece belongs permanently within royal control, Catherine can become custodian or authorized wearer without becoming unrestricted owner. The paperwork matters because a sentimental family intention cannot override the legal status of an object that forms part of a wider constitutional collection. Palace lawyers compare Elizabeth's instruction with the authority of King Charles III. Charles approves Catherine's use of pieces where his consent is required, but the arrangement preserves historic ownership and royal custody. Catherine cannot sell a dynastic object, divide it between heirs, or remove it from royal control simply because she wears it. The rules transform the handover into stewardship rather than inheritance in the ordinary sense. That is also why Anne insists on signatures. Each custody line records which object has moved into Catherine's active use, what restrictions remain, and which office retains authority over future appearances. Most of the collection clears that process, but one case creates a deeper problem. The jewel inside is so closely linked with Queen Elizabeth II, state occasions, and female royal authority that advisors fear Catherine wearing it during Charles's reign could send an unintended message. Camilla remains queen. Catherine remains Princess of Wales. A private transfer might be legally manageable, but a public appearance could suggest succession before succession. Charles therefore has to approve not only the custody arrangement, but the conditions governing public use. Nothing can move forward until the palace is satisfied that custody will not be confused with an immediate constitutional promotion. Anne opens the first cleared case and presents the South Africa diamond necklace given to Princess Elizabeth for her 21st birthday in 1947, together with the matching bracelet created from stones removed when the necklace was later shortened. The pair is placed together because Anne wants Catherine to see the complete history rather than two separate objects. The gift belonged to the period when Elizabeth was entering royal adulthood and beginning to understand that birthdays, travel, and personal milestones would increasingly become part of public duty. The necklace matters because Elizabeth's 21st year became associated with her famous commitment to a life of service, particularly in connection with the Commonwealth and royal responsibility. Anne does not present the diamonds as a reward for Catherine's status. She presents them as evidence of what royal adulthood demanded from her mother. Catherine is expected to use them selectively at diplomatic or Commonwealth occasions where that history adds meaning. The point is not that she now possesses Elizabeth's diamonds. The point is that she accepts the burden of knowing when their appearance says something useful and when leaving them in storage says more. Catherine signs the first custody entry, acknowledging responsibility for the necklace, the bracelet, and their documented history. Anne signs as family witness, then closes the inventory page before moving to the next case. The sequence is deliberate. Catherine has now accepted one group linked with lifelong duty, but the second case carries a more intimate connection to Elizabeth's marriage and to Queen Mary. Anne knows the next object will move the ceremony closer to the issue the palace has been avoiding. not simply whether Catherine can wear Elizabeth's jewels, but whether she is ready to carry the visual language of queenship before she actually becomes queen. The second case, therefore, carries more risk than the first, because the public already knows exactly what those images have meant before. The central object is the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, a jewel whose history reaches through Queen Mary and the 1947 royal wedding. It had been presented to Queen Mary for her marriage in 1893 and later given to Princess Elizabeth as a wedding present. Over the following decades, it became one of Elizabeth's most recognizable tiaras. Anne does not need to exaggerate its significance. The difficulty is obvious. Catherine wearing it would create an immediate visual connection with the late Queen that few other pieces could produce. Catherine has already worn the lover's knot tiara, creating a strong public association with Princess Diana. The Girls of Great Britain and Ireland. Tiara would connect her just as directly with Queen Elizabeth II. Anne explains that this combination is precisely why the piece has been delayed. Catherine cannot build her public identity by becoming a copy of either woman. Diana represented one kind of emotional connection. Elizabeth represented a different form of endurance and institutional continuity. Catherine has to carry lessons from both while remaining recognizably herself, or the symbolism of the jewels will overwhelm the person wearing them. Anne therefore frames the tiara as a test of Catherine's independence, historic memory, and future queenship. She is not told to put it on. She is told to understand why it matters. That restraint is part of the preparation Elizabeth wanted. But advisors inside the palace still resist allowing the piece to leave shared storage in active custody. Their concern is not whether Catherine has behaved correctly. It is timing. During Charles's reign, with Camilla still queen, Elizabeth's signature tiara on Catherine could be interpreted as a premature transfer of female authority inside the monarchy. That risk is precisely why Anne insists that Catherine understand the piece privately before anyone considers whether it should appear publicly. The strongest objection comes from advisors concerned about Camilla's position, Charles's reign, and public perception. They recommend keeping the tiara and several other highly recognizable pieces in shared royal storage until William becomes king. Catherine can continue wearing jewels already associated with her without creating questions over who currently occupies the senior female role. From an administrative point of view, waiting is simple. From Anne's point of view, it defeats the entire purpose of Elizabeth's instruction. Preparation cannot begin after the moment of succession if the intention was to make Catherine ready before it arrives. Catherine offers the compromise that clears the dispute. She accepts private custody without demanding immediate public use, and every major appearance involving the collection remains subject to the king's approval. That allows Charles to protect Camilla's current position while honoring his mother's plan. Catherine can learn the history, understand the protocols, and begin using selected pieces gradually without turning one state banquet into an unofficial declaration about the next reign. The distinction gives the palace control over timing, even though Anne refuses to postpone the handover itself. Charles agrees, and the final authorization reaches Windsor Castle before the ceremony continues. Anne now has what she needs: sovereign approval, a clear custody framework, and Catherine's commitment not to use the collection competitively. She refuses to divide the group or send the most important pieces back into indefinite storage. In her view, Elizabeth did not preserve the selection so it could become frozen history. The jewels were meant to keep working through future service. With the procedural obstacle removed, Anne reaches beneath the largest case and pulls out one final envelope. It contains no new jewel and no legal shortcut, but it determines how everything already placed before Catherine can be used. The envelope contains the condition governing Catherine's use of the collection, the crown, and future generations. The jewels are not to become displays of private wealth. They are to be worn when they serve diplomacy, remembrance, continuity, or major royal duty. Catherine must preserve the history of every piece, including who gave it, who altered it, and which woman wore it before her. Anne stresses that this knowledge is part of the custody itself. If the history is forgotten, the jewelry becomes decoration, and the entire purpose of keeping the collection together is lost. A second condition prevents the pieces being used in household rivalry, personal competition, or private division. Catherine's future position beside William does not make the jewels weapons against Camilla or any other royal woman. Anne is required to explain each object personally because Elizabeth wanted context to travel with custody. Catherine agrees that future appearances will reflect service rather than possession. She also accepts that some pieces may remain governed by sovereign permission even while she becomes their principal. The arrangement gives her responsibility without encouraging the idea that historical jewelry can belong to one royal household in isolation from the institution. Anne finally accepts Catherine's commitment and signs the inventory as Elizabeth's daughter, family witness, and guardian of the instruction. Catherine signs beneath her. The remaining cases are then brought forward for the formal handover. By this point, the diamonds are almost secondary to the structure surrounding them. Catherine has accepted that each appearance will carry a message, that the pieces cannot be used for rivalry, and that their histories must survive intact. Only now does Anne reveal the complete selection, including the object she had refused to release until every condition was understood. Anne has deliberately made responsibility come before possession, ensuring Catherine reaches the final case only after accepting the obligations attached to it. 10. Anne formally places the South Africa diamond necklace and bracelet into Catherine's custody, followed by the Dorset bow brooch and Queen Mary's diamond bangles described in the inventory. The sequence links different parts of Elizabeth's life: adulthood, marriage, family inheritance, and decades of service. Catherine does not treat the pieces as a collection to display immediately. Each one is logged, accompanied by its history, and assigned conditions governing future wear. Anne is careful to keep the emphasis on continuity because the jewels are meaningful only if their use remains connected to the purpose that made them royal in the first place. Then Anne places the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara before Catherine under the authority approved by Charles. Catherine does not immediately wear it. Instead, she listens while Anne reads the final instruction attached to the collection. That refusal to turn the moment into a private coronation completes the symbolism. The tiara is not being handed over because Catherine has replaced Camilla, or because William has already become king. It is being placed in active custody so Catherine can carry its history intelligently when the proper public moment arrives. Anne then fastens the Dorset bow brooch to Catherine's dress. Catherine signs the final inventory, and Anne signs beneath her as witness. The ceremony remains private until one of the transferred jewels appears at a major state occasion. When that happens, the public will see only the finished image: Catherine entering beneath palace lights, wearing something inseparable from Elizabeth's reign. What happened at Windsor will give that image its deeper meaning. Anne has not simply passed on jewelry. She has transferred responsibility for preserving how those pieces serve the monarchy. The strongest signal will come if Catherine eventually appears wearing Elizabeth's signature tiara. Comparisons will be immediate, but Anne's instruction protects Catherine from being reduced to imitation. Elizabeth's legacy, Diana's influence, and Catherine's identity are not meant to collapse into one another. The point is continuity without replacement. Catherine carries memories of women who came before her while building a role that belongs to her own generation. That is why Anne waited until Catherine had enough experience to understand that receiving an object and understanding an object are not the same thing. The final meaning of the handover, therefore, has little to do with ownership. Catherine receives custody, royal responsibility, and preparation for queenship. The diamonds remain connected with Elizabeth. The tiara remains part of the monarchy's historic visual language. Catherine's task is to use them when they strengthen the crown rather than when they simply attract attention. Anne's part is finished only when she believes Catherine understands that distinction, because that is the condition running through every case she opened. And when Catherine, Princess of Wales, eventually enters a state room wearing one of Elizabeth's most recognizable pieces, the date and the occasion will matter as much as the jewel itself. The palace may describe it as remembrance. It may be tied to diplomacy or a major royal ceremony. But anyone who understands Anne's handover, Elizabeth's instruction, and William's future reign will see another possibility. The jewel will not announce that Catherine is queen before her time. It will show that the preparation for that responsibility began long before the crown finally reaches her. That preparation, rather than the diamonds themselves, is the final purpose of the private handover.